Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and today I'm hoping to start what will be a series of videos in which I look back on the last week and talk about everything I've read. I have been rather inconsistently doing wrap-up videos for the month. For January and February, it was a lot of the Fairy Loot books, and then I did a video of like everything else I was reading. But I'm reading so much, and we haven't even hit summer yet, that I figured it would be a good idea to do like a weekly recap of reads for a couple of different reasons. One, it ensures that I'm at least checking in once a week and getting used to producing every week. Second reason is because I am reading so much, I think it's a little bit more digestible to just say like, hey, here's a 5-10 minute video of what I've been reading this week, and talk about it real quick rather than like a huge 30-40 minute video of everything I've read over the course of a month. And the third reason, and kind of the same vein as the first, is that I'm hoping this keeps me better on track with my journaling, because I will neglect my journal for a week or two, and then I can go back and figure it out through Goodreads and everything, what I've read, but it'll be easier if I'm kind of checking in once a week at least and like writing down what I've read that week. Afterwards, I'll also talk about like what's in the TBR for next week, what's in the pipe, to see what I'm going to try to get through for the next update video. So as I'm going through these reads, write down in the comments anything that you'd like me to do a deeper dive on. I'm going to try to keep these reviews on this section of my channel short, but if there's anything that stands out to you that you want to hear more about, then please let me know, and I will record longer, more detailed thoughts or spoiler videos if that's something that you're interested in. So going in roughly reading order from this last week, the first thing we have is Destroy All Humans, They Can't Be Regenerated. This is a Magic the Gathering centered story. This is not like a game come to life type of story. Rather, it is a slice of life middle school romance with the backdrop of we are in the 90s and our protagonists play Magic the Gathering. So they're talking about the decks that were coming out. They're talking about the sets and things, and they play games, and that's a mechanism by which their relationship develops. It is cute and fun. I've given, I think, every single one 4 stars. But there's nothing groundbreaking here. You have to be someone who either enjoys that middle school romance type story, that first love type story, or someone who really enjoys Magic the Gathering and gets a kick out of seeing all these old references to card sets and old strategies and things like that. I'm in the latter category, but I also rather enjoy the romance here. It's very cute, and it has a very innocent quality to it, which I really do appreciate. It's cute and fun. I like it quite a bit. Next up, we have Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, the third book in the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett. This is one that I have talked about on the channel multiple times. I really enjoyed the original, enjoyed the sequel. I enjoyed this one as well, although maybe to a slightly lesser degree than the first two. I do appreciate that it does a lot to both raise the stakes that have been set in the previous 2 books, but also to make the story more personal for both parties of the relationship. So you have Emily Wilde learning a lot more about the fairy realms and about Wendell Bamblebee's whole backstory, but also some of Emily Wilde's history is brought up in here with her father and the things that happened to him in the past. Appreciated that they attempted to kind of meld their personal stories into this final volume. I'm very sad that this is only 3 volumes. This is only 3 books. Because I really enjoyed the ride and I would really like to see more of these characters, but I also understand like not wanting to write something perpetually. So yes, Emily Wilde series is very good if you are a fan of that kind of cozy fantasy. I know some people argue that it's not really cozy fantasy. It falls under my definition of that. Emily Wilde is a very interesting character, obsessed with fairies. She's a scientist, so there's a lot of that idea of just scientific exploration and the joy of learning new things and of research, and that is the aspect of it that I enjoy the most. The relationship has been developing over the course of the 3 books, so that is also a plus for me. I'm not the hugest fan of romantasy, but I feel like at the very least this one was written well, and we do have the characters kind of pushing off of one another, and not always like just getting along, and not always like instantly falling in love, that kind of thing. So I do appreciate the relationships in here as well. We also bring several characters back from the previous stories, so that's another way that this wraps up the trilogy in a really engaging and fun way. The next book I read was actually an audiobook. I listened to the audiobook version of Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Message. So similar to Between the World and Me, this is framed as Ta-Nehisi Coates writing a letter to his son, but is really just a message to a wider audience than I would argue Between the World and Me is designed for. But I also feel like, while poignant and while pointing out a lot of the hypocrisy in like education, as well as he talks extensively in one of the chapters about Israel and Palestine and like his takeaways from visiting the country and seeing the way that different people were treated. This one I gave 4 stars. I felt like it was just as poignant as Between the World and Me, but it was a little bit more hit or miss with the cohesion. So it didn't feel as though it was one narrative, rather it was a series of essays. And by the time I realized that, I was already pretty far into it. And so that disjointed nature just made it to where it didn't hit me quite as strong as Between the World and Me, but it's still one to look at. Don Green has said that to read is to see how others see you and how other people see themselves, and I think that that is probably the most apt description of reading a Ta-Nehisi Coates book. It gives me a very good perception of Ta-Nehisi Coates' experience and his worldview, and while I don't always agree with what he's saying, it's very interesting to get that perspective and to see something from another person's point of view, and it definitely makes me want to follow up and read more from Coates and read more nonfiction about what he is discussing in these essays. Next up, I read The Woods by James Tynion. This is the omnibus complete edition that just came out from Boom Studios. I believe it was the 10-year anniversary of Tynion writing for Boom, and so they put his material into one giant book. This is 36 chapters, 36 issues of this story, and there's a lot in here. I really don't think a couple of minutes is going to do it justice, but basically my takeaway from it is I do feel like the middle spins its wheels a little bit. I don't know if it needed to be as long as it was, but it was an excellent example of Tynion's strength, creating these characters that have believable and complex worldviews, and then putting them into an extreme situation to test those worldviews, to test their view of themselves, their view of the world. And characters go through quite a number of changes throughout the story, and there's quite a lot in here that was rather shocking to read, given the kind of initial horror adventure vibe it was giving off. It became rather intense at points. This is one that I would recommend if you were a fan of Lost, especially early Lost with more of the mystery, or if you're a fan of Tynion's work and want to see something from earlier in his career. Another one maybe is if you're a fan of Morning Glories, if you've ever read the Morning Glories comic. It has that idea of the students being put into these very bizarre situations and having that mystery of what's going on. Check it out if you're a fan of horror comics and kid-based adventure stories. I think would be another good one if you're looking for something new. And by something new, I mean something 10 years old that you maybe have not checked out before. The last book of the week is probably the only one that I wouldn't give a recommendation on, and that is The Rose Bargain. This is another one of my Fairy Loot books. Actually, my second to last Fairy Loot book. I've only got one left before I catch up with my reading. This is the story of Ivy, who lives in a alternate universe England, where the Fairy Queen has taken over, and now everybody, when they come of age, gets one bargain, gets one wish from the Fairy Queen, and they have to give up something in return. And some of the things that they give up are really bizarre. To be able to be a very good writer, but they can't smell flowers anymore, or something like that. What ends up happening in this particular story is that the queen, her son is going to get married, so she's selecting some of the girls that year to participate in a competition to win his hand. And so essentially it is like The Bachelor meets fairy lore, I guess. It gets fairly dark toward the end, like darker than I thought it would, and then it kind of pulls back. But the very end of this book is what really bothered me, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to discuss spoilers. But it definitely lowered it in my estimation for a couple of different things. There was a last minute character change out of nowhere that arguably makes sense, but is very frustrating to go through the entire book and then suddenly have this turn. And then also there was something that was established as a rule for the way the world works, and that was also hand waved away toward the end, and I found that incredibly frustrating. I didn't find that one clever. I did enjoy the romance elements of it up to a certain point. I rather don't mind the romance if it is like the primary purpose of the book. So this is like a romance with some fantasy elements in it, and not a fantasy that is trying to shove in a romance. But know going into it that this is not a complete story. This is the first in at least a duology, maybe a trilogy. I don't know. I haven't looked it up yet. I don't plan on continuing it. But if you are a fan of the romantasy genre, you want to see something with like a fairy bent to it, I think that a lot of what it did was fun and interesting, and it did, like I said, there were some dark things toward the end of the book, if that is something that you are into, but it just was not for me at the end of the day. To close out the video, let's talk about what is down the pipe for next week. So first of all, we have Where Shadows Meet. So this is the very last fairy loot that I have as of now. I might be getting a box within like the next week or so, but I'm catching up. I was like 11 behind. So if I can get through this book, then it'll just be like one a month. And so it's very high on my priority list. This is probably what I'll be taking into work next week. This is a vampire fiction book. It seems like it has a romance element to it as well. I don't remember much more than that, but I will probably be talking about it next week. I also have Knights Season 1 Part 2. We talked about Knights a couple of different times on the channel. It is an absolutely insane comic about growing up and falling in love, but also vampires and ghosts and an alternate universe, and it's written in 4 different languages, so it's a lot. I believe I described this as Fully Cooley meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I stand by that. Very interested to read Volume 2 and see where the story goes, because the first volume ended on such a crazy cliffhanger. I have no idea what to expect from this second volume. And lastly, I have The Dark Room. So this is actually a recommendation from my librarian at the school I work at. I found it at a local comic book shop in their clearance section. So it was like $5, and it had already been recommended to me. So I was like, sure, let's check it out. It has to do with werewolves, secret societies, blessed animals, cursed objects. It's a fantasy horror comedy, so sounds cool. I will let you know next week how that went. I will be back on next Saturday with a recap of everything I read this coming week, so look forward to that. Until then, I hope your reading journey is going well. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.